So everybody, welcome back. And today we have a special guest from the other side of the pond. Greer Jones is our guest, and she is the mom of a son who is on the autism spectrum and has ADHD, and she has a podcast, and we're excited to have her on our show to share with us a bit about her journey navigating autism with her young son. Welcome, Greer.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Share a bit about your journey and what led you to starting your podcast, The Unfinished Idea.
So my son, who is now 6, he was diagnosed with autism and ADHD officially about, 9 months ago now, I guess, around that time. But before that, we noticed signs, even when he was about 2, that he just processed the world differently, that he was reacting to things differently. And it was a very mixed time because we were kind of just coming out of COVID. So we'd been in lockdown for about 18 months. And in the UK, we were in lockdown. It was very different than in the US. We'll just say it was a full-on lockdown. And so we'd go to medical professionals like the GP or doctor, and they often just said, oh, it's because he's just been in lockdown for 18 months. He's not really socialized with other people. Because the parks were closed and all sorts. It was very different. And so we just thought, okay, we'll just wait and see. And it wasn't in the UK, they start school at 4. And when he started school, again, we just could see signs that he was just still the best way to say is he just was different. Like, he just processed the world different. He would react differently. He was interested in different things. He had a very delayed speech, but he could say numbers. So to help him communicate, because he'd get frustrated when we couldn't understand him, we would number items. So our fridge was number 2, and it had a number 2 on it, which at the time was a great idea because it helped him communicate. However, it didn't help him totally learn the word. So sometimes he still says, oh, I need something out of number 2. And we're like, oh, fridge. But his language has improved a lot. But so we kind of just were trying to work with school when he was about 4, to to try and get him help. And it's just been very difficult. And it was about 6 months into him being in school that we just hit a really difficult point. He was not happy at school. School didn't seem to know what to do. It was just all so much. And it was lonely. I was going in 3 times a week to school to either calm him down because I couldn't calm him down, or to take him home, or to meet about his behavior, or, I was in school a lot. And it was just, I felt so overwhelmed. I felt so lonely. I had no clue what to do. I always kind of say I felt like someone had dropped me into a pitch black maze and told me, you need to get out. And so I kind of started asking other friends, have you experienced this? Or, and there's also a little bit of a culture thing. So I am from the US. My parents are teachers in the US. So I'm very aware of the US school system, but not of the UK system. And so just asking friends, and they weren't experiencing that. They weren't experiencing kind of all the different things we were.
We'd like to take a moment to thank our amazing sponsors who make this podcast possible. First up, we have 3D learning experts. If you or someone you love struggles with dyslexia, dyscalculia, or similar learning differences, 3D Learning Experts is here to help. They specialize in virtual tutoring for students of all ages. From first grade to adulthood, their expert tutors use the proven Orton-Gillingham method for language arts, structured and sequential program for writing success, and a multi-sensory approach to math. This ensures students enhance their reading, writing, spelling, and math skills in a way that suits their needs. Empowering students with confidence and success. That's what 3D Learning Experts is all about. To learn more, visit 3dlearningexperts.com. And when it's time to unwind, why not escape to fabulous Las Vegas with Jess Arce Vacations? Whether you're planning a quick getaway or a family reunion, Jess Arce Vacations offers 4 unique stays at one convenient location. Just under 3 miles from the Strip, choose from a cozy tiny house, 2 stylish studios, or a spacious 4-bedroom, 2-bath unit. All guests have access to amazing amenities, including a play pool, putting green, barbecue, fire pit, and each unit has its own private patio. Perfect for any occasion, they've got the ideal spot for your next adventure. Start planning your trip today at facebook.com/CasaRSA Vacations. Thank you to our sponsors for their support and for the incredible services they provide. Now, let's get back to today's episode.
And so,
can you go into detail about what kind of things you were experiencing?
so like meltdowns. So my son would be, I always say he feels massive, like he feels deeply. So he feels joy deeply, he feels anger deeply, and he can switch in an instant. So he would be happily playing with so I have another son who's now 3, and they'd be happy playing together. And all of a sudden he would just be really upset, and he would hit his brother. He would just like his brother. And then he'd go into full meltdown mode, and just be screaming and kicking. And he occasionally would throw things, like, because he was having a meltdown. He was overwhelmed by what was happening around him. And
now, could that also be because he couldn't communicate his feelings?
Yeah, so a lot of that is also he was not able to communicate his feelings, but also just not even knowing his feelings. And so that's something we've done a lot of work on, is recognizing kind of when you feel this way, this is what that feeling actually is. So we have a feeling chart in every room of our house to help him, because sometimes he'll even so the feeling chart is like kind of a face, like a angry looking face for anger, or a worried looking face for being worried. So he can just point to it and say, that's how I feel, because sometimes he can't even use the word, like the language just has kind of left him, if that makes sense. I don't know, that sounds strange to say, words have left him, but that's when he gets so emotional. Because it's not just he gets really angry, he cries he gets very so when my husband leaves in the morning to go to work, probably 60% of the time he'll be in tears, because he's like, he doesn't want his dad to leave. And I'm like, but he'll be back. Like he comes back every day, and we go through a whole routine of he leaves so he can go and help people. He's in the medical profession. So he goes and helps people, and then he comes back, and then we get to have bedtime together. And I kind of remind him all the things that they kind of do in the evening together, because he'll just cry, or today he cried on the way home from school because his friend wasn't walking with us all the way home. We live about 5-minute walk from our school, and his friend lives just past us, and so he cried because of that. And so again, just kind of trying to help him say it's okay to feel these things. It's okay to be happy, to be sad, to be angry, but it's how we deal with them is kind of where we're really trying to work with him. So it's not okay to hit when you're angry. When you're crying, it's okay to stop for a minute and to voice that you're stopping, but you can't run off, and just kind of, he'll often run off randomly. So it's those kinds of things that we still experience, but we were experiencing I felt very much more blindly to it. And I'll be honest with you, about 12 months ago, I wouldn't actually have known what a meltdown was. I would have just thought it was a tantrum, and he was just throwing a tantrum, because I didn't really know what autism was. I'd kind of knew about it, but not that it's a whole spectrum. I knew kind of some kind of more extreme things.
I was going to ask you, has he been diagnosed at what level of the spectrum he's on? Because I have kids, well, basically at this point, all 4 of my kids feel like they're on the autism spectrum, but none of my kids had meltdowns. But none of them are like real severe on the spectrum. They're just, lower, moderate, not ever diagnosed autistic.
Yeah, so they kind of do it slightly different in the UK. I know there's different language in the US, which I can't always remember, but he kind of sits right in the middle for autism, but he's raging ADHD. And the ADHD is more the extreme emotion. So autism, you'll have some emotion and you'll have the overwhelm, but it's the extreme emotion comes from the ADHD side, which I don't know all why. That's something I'm still I've done some research on, and it's still, I'm like, it's weird to me. The brain is such a complex thing. But yeah, so he sits in the middle for autism, and then he's classed as a raging, quote unquote, raging ADHD.
Okay. And I've never heard that term before. But I definitely had behavior problems, and I attribute that to A, my ADHD, and B, my being held back in 3rd grade, causing aggression because I didn't know how to, verbalize how I was feeling. Which if he's not able to talk, I would think that's part of the frustration. So he is,
So he is, his language is like improving. We've seen massive growth this year. He's not quite up to his age level, but we just had a meeting with the teacher today, so I'm like, oh, I can tell you exactly where he is. But that idea that he should make it up to his age level by the end of the year,
Nice.
which is really encouraging. It's amazing to see, and like it was really interesting. My best friend was over, and it's hard when you're in, having conversation with him every day. You just learn his sounds and his words. So I'd probably know more of what he was saying than other people could understand. But yeah, about a few days ago, my best friend was over, and she hadn't seen him for a couple of weeks, and she was just so impressed with that she could actually hold a full kind of conversation with him.
Oh, nice.
Which was really cool. I was like, oh, it was working. All this extra work, all this extra kind of, therapy, he has speech language therapy, and he had like play therapy. So all of these extra things are helping. And it's a lot. Like I said, it's all these they're extra things. He goes to school, then he does this on top. And for us, it's very important that he's still a kid. And so being able to still take part in, activities. So he likes to do Lego. They have a Lego club that he likes to go to. And a friend has kind of started this drawing club. So he wants to go to that. So things like that, we're still trying to balance, all the things that's going to help him in life, but then also all the fun and kind of clubs and social things. Because he's also it's very interesting because a lot of autistic people wouldn't say they're necessarily social butterflies. But I think, again, because he has that raging ADHD, he loves people, and he loves being with people. So he likes that kind of being around people. And then he gets overwhelmed very quickly by that. So it's a very funny kind of dynamic that we have, and he has to kind of alter.
So what are some of the biggest challenges you are facing after finding out that he is autistic and has ADHD?
So one of the biggest things, which may or may not surprise people, but is getting the support he needs in school. We have had to really fight. I've had to go countless meetings to what we call the SYNCO, which is kind of the special education needs coordinator. And just say I mean, she's a lovely person. It's a system that's broken. But we've had to really just fight to get a plan in place. And even that's not fully complete yet, even though he has a diagnosis, and just to get what he needs. And I mean, at one point, the school, intentionally or not, we don't know, were kind of telling us one thing, which was actually illegal. And it was only because I spoke to a friend who's a few years ahead of us, kind of in the neurodiverse world journey, that she said, oh, no, that's illegal. They can't actually do that, but they'll try and do that. So we went back to the school and said, you can't do this. You can't, that's not right. But we know a lot of other parents who wouldn't have known that. Like there's a lot of people who, just believe the school because they're educators. They know everything, right? So I think that's one of the biggest challenges has been getting the support he needs. And then the other part is just kind of letting people see that he, they talk about neurodivergence as an invisible disability. And it's that idea that I've kind of, one of the things I say a lot is I'm trying to bring the invisible to people's eyes. And that idea that he's a special kid. He has so many great ideas, but he has a lot of things that are happening inside of him. And so when he has these meltdowns, particularly, they're not tantrums. They're not just him not getting his way, but it's actually his body reacting to being overstimulated. And so trying to just help people see that, people in our lives, kind of who are in our everyday lives, to see he's not just an out of control kid. He's just overwhelmed, and, his body doesn't know how to regulate like others do.
And your parents both being teachers, are they able to give you some input and guidance around his autism and your experience?
Yeah, they've been able to help quite a bit. I mean, my mom taught kind of the age he's at now, so that's been great. It's really been interesting talking to them and some even educators. So they're about to retire, my parents, but educators who've just started teaching or maybe been teaching for a few years, and just there's actually, so my parents were saying a few months ago how they actually have never had training on neurodivergence. They've never had training on ADHD or autism or dyslexia. It's just something that they've never had. And then talking to teachers, now who are in the classroom who are, kind of starting out or been maybe teaching about, I think one I've spoke to about 5 years, they, again, haven't had any training. One of them has had specific training because they asked for it because they knew they had a student who had, they call it like a PDA profile, so a low demand demand avoidance profile. So they wanted to have like special training in that. But there was no kind of general training for teachers, which I find really hard that that's the case. But at the same time, I mean, that's obviously their experience. And so I just think, I don't know, I just find it really shocking that teachers aren't getting trained in this. And I know here in the UK, it's really been only the last probably 2 years that teachers have had more training. So they might have previously had kind of an overview, but it's been really the last 2 years where people have actually had like specific training on ADHD or specific training on autism. And that's, I mean, yeah, I just find that, again, like shocking that it's only been a couple of years, but also glad that is happening here in the UK.
Is your child struggling with school, feeling overwhelmed? Introducing 3D Learning Experts, your child's personal tutor. Our expert educators provide personalized, one-on-one support tailored specifically to teach to your child's learning style. We specialize in helping students with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and similar learning challenges. Our tutors are trained to provide effective strategies for reading, spelling, writing, and math. With our innovative virtual platform, your child can learn from the comfort of their own home. No more commuting or scheduling conflicts. Give your child the boost they need to succeed. Experience the difference with 3D Learning Experts.
Yeah, that is disappointing that, a whole generation, more than one generation of teachers have no training whatsoever. I mean, I definitely experienced that with my kids and their dyslexia. Other than in Texas, the teachers had no clue what was going on with my kids. And when we moved to Texas, our daughter's teacher knew right away because she was educated. So, I mean, that's all it takes is, educating teachers, and then they'll know more. They can help the students sooner. But I also find when I provide webinars for parents and teachers never attend. They're free webinars. They could learn in an hour more about why their students are having these challenges. So, it's definitely a broken system. And I guess it's just as broken in the UK as it is here in the US, it sounds like.
Yeah. I think I always say, for at least in the UK, the kind of Syncos are like a Band-Aid to a open heart surgery system. So the system is so broken, it just needs redoing. And what the Syncos are trying to do, it just isn't going to work, like, because there's just not funding. There's, all these different things. So yeah, it's definitely a broken system.
Yeah. And so in what ways has being a mom of a neurodivergent child changed or strengthened you as a person?
That's a good question. It's definitely given me, I don't know if it's given me courage or just forced me to just advocate and say, kind of use my voice a little bit more, and say, this isn't right. I was talking to a friend, and she, again, she's about her kids are now adults who are autistic. And she's like, yeah, once you start advocating, you kind of don't stop. So she was doing she was trying to get in her area, some ramps. And she's like, my kids aren't in wheelchairs. And yet I feel like that's what we need to do. We need to change, like this kind of plan, or I don't know, something like that. It was just that idea that, like, once you kind of start advocating, you kind of just keep going, which, I think that's something I have found is I'm kind of now not just advocating for my son, but kind of wider group of people. So kind of that idea of, using my voice. I also would say it's taught me a lot about patience, and counting to 10 in your head. I've realized, when emotions are high, good or bad emotions, when they're high, if I can be kind of just that constant, consistent emotion, it can help a lot of situations. And so counting to 10 is always, it's a very good thing to remember.
Well, that's great advice. And that's just such a simple thing. You just have to get accustomed to doing that, right? And not just reacting immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what advice would you give parents who are just starting out in the journey after receiving a diagnosis that their child is autistic and or has ADHD?
The biggest thing I would say is, one, you're not alone. I think just from my experience, I felt so lonely, and I felt lonely, and I felt like I'd failed my child. And so to know like you're not alone and you haven't failed your child, is kind of, I think, the biggest thing I would want parents to know. But also that it's okay to also walk with grief and sadness and joy, kind of like what Inside Out has taught us, right? But that there are going to be moments that happen, that are going to be sad. There are things that are going to be sad because you're going to think, oh, my son or my child isn't going to get to experience that. But there's also some really great moments of joy because they think so differently, because they experience the world differently. They come up with some amazing ideas. I'm convinced that my kid is going to be an inventor of some sort. So watch this space. He's going to invent something because he just comes up, he sees a problem and he comes up with a solution that very rarely is it one I think of. So there's kind of that, yeah, it's okay to feel sad, but also okay to feel joy.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think it's so important for parents to connect and support each other?
I think there's power in numbers. I think that idea that when parents are connecting and sharing their stories, sharing their experiences, it can help people feel seen and can feel heard. I always say I'm grateful for having community that just get it. I don't have to explain why my son is not wearing socks in not wearing socks when there's snow outside, because he doesn't like socks. It's kind of just that, yeah, being connected, being in a group who they don't have to necessarily know you, but they know what you're going through. And that kind of just opens up doors to then having more conversations and being connected. I think I definitely am a believer that, we're all to be raised like, oh, I'm totally butchering the phrase, but the idea of like, take the village to raise a child. And unfortunately, when you're raising a neurodiverse child, your village can shrink very quickly. But I also think that's just not the right village. I think you could have a really big village. It just might not be the one you thought. And so the idea that, yeah, when you're connecting and sharing, you're kind of growing your village, you're growing opportunities to just know people who get it.
Now, having had 4 neurodivergent children myself, I found that people didn't necessarily talk. I mean, my kids are all grown now, so maybe things are changing some, but I don't feel like people really talked about their kids' struggles. People don't want the world to know that their child is having challenges, so they try to, tuck it away. So it's harder to find your village when that's happening. Do you experience the same thing, or has it been different for you?
I would say it's a mixture of, yeah, I think there is still stigmas around, it was interesting when we were telling someone that our son was autistic, and they were like, he can't be autistic, he can speak. Like, because to them, autistic people can't speak. And so there's definitely this kind of, yeah, definitely still some stigmas around that people kind of are scared to share. But I think the stigmas are slowly being kind of replaced with life experiences. And so people are sharing a little bit more. I would say it took me a little while to find my village. It was through sharing. I just was one day I was so lost. I just put a post up on my Instagram, not knowing what was going to happen, and thought I can always take it down. I can, a few people will see it and I can take it down. And it was actually through that post, I had quite a few people come and say, yeah, my son's actually autistic as well. That I was like, had no clue that their child was autistic. And so, yeah, I think it's just, if you're wanting to find your village, kind of just ask a question. Or if you're wanting to find people who get it, kind of just saying, for me, I also went to my local school, so the school, and said, this school's full of neurodivergent kids. I want to meet moms who are raising them. Can we do something? And the school said, sure, you could do a coffee morning. So I did a coffee morning. And from that, I got people's numbers and we started a WhatsApp group. And so now we're kind of connected through that. So it's kind of just taking a step forward and being brave, and kind of maybe, asking the school or asking a local area or, somewhere, just saying, I want to meet people like this. And yeah, there's different avenues that you can do that, but I think it's changing. I think the world is slowly changing, and people are starting to open up a little bit more, but it's still not quite there.
And what's one thing you wish someone had told you when you first began your journey?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the one thing I wish someone had told me was the school doesn't know everything, and that you know your child best. And so to not get lost in, oh, this is what the school says, so I'm just going to go with it, but instead saying, no, I know my child, I know what they need, and so I'm going to kind of keep fighting for them, and not just kind of just do what the school says. So I would,
Yeah. That's great advice. I wish I had that advice when the school suggested I hold my daughter back because I thought that they knew more than I did, and it was not good advice. It didn't help her to be held back. So yeah, I think a lot of parents do think that doctors know best, that teachers and principals know best, and we know our children better than anyone else does.
Yeah. It's something that's also helped me. And it's actually something someone's only recently told me, and I have tried it a few times. I still kind of fall back, but is you inform your school, or you inform, wherever you're going, instead of requesting. And so the idea that you're saying, hey, I'm just informing you that so my son has headphones. So I'm just informing you, my son uses headphones, they're in his backpack. Instead of saying, oh, could my son use headphones? They're in his backpack. Because you're not, you're letting them know what your child needs and how, that need can be met. But you're also not giving them the option to not do that. And that's something that we found to kind of really be helpful. There was a bit of a issue about headphones. He had some, and I totally forgot to tell the school, so it was partly on me, but he took them out, and there was a bit of a kind of back and forth about it. And it was after school. I was like, oh, right, okay, yeah, so he will be using them. Whereas I think previously I probably would have been like, oh, could he use them? Like, I think that would really help him. I tried and do that. And I found when I said, oh, he will be using them, I'll make sure they're in his bag every day, it was like, okay, great. Yep. It was just kind of, it was done. Attitude. So since then I've kind of really been trying to think through like, how can I inform instead of request?
That's great. That's great advice. And if you could leave parents with one key message about raising a neurodivergent child, what would that be?
Have fun, or remember to have fun. I know it's not easy, and you are probably exhausted from just trying to get through the day. But try and have fun. They are kids, they are learning, and they are navigating the neurodiverse world with you. And so take little moments to have fun. And that might be blowing bubbles. My son loves bubbles. So this afternoon we blew bubbles for 15 minutes. So it doesn't have to be anything extravagant, but just, take little moments to have fun together, and enjoy being together.
That's great. Thank you. And where can people find you and follow your journey?
So I'm on social media under the Unfinished Idea. I always kind of say, follow my brain. It's a little brain icon. So it's, don't know if you really want to follow my brain. It can go some crazy places. But so it's the Unfinished Idea. I also have a website, which is theunfinishedidea.com, which is also there. And then, for the podcast, it's the Unfinished Idea, anywhere where podcasts are streamed.
Awesome. Thank you, Greer, for taking the time to share your experience with our audience. And if people want to continue to learn what's going on with your family, they can just follow you. So that's awesome. And we'll be able to see new things happening for you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been really fun.
Thank you.